I found the footage at 3 a.m., hidden camera, bedroom angle, me collapsing on our bathroom floor. He'd been filming my physical breakdown for months, distributing the recordings online with titles like Subject Deterioration Documentation and Real Girlfriend Slowly Breaks Down. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the comment section. Dozens of men sharing tips on how to replicate his approach on their own girlfriends. I was patient zero in a psychological plague. I'm about to show you the complete playbook these manipulators use to destroy women while making it look like natural health problems. By the end, you'll know exactly how they operate and the one technique that stops them cold. But first, you need to understand how I went from 138 pounds to 98 pounds in 6 months, while 3 doctors found nothing wrong. Because what I discovered in his computer files will make your skin crawl. The attack started at Grind Coffee. On a Tuesday, Marcus approached with surgical precision, expensive cologne, perfect smile, calculated charm. I watched him work the room like a manipulator selecting prey. He complimented the college kid barista, remembered his name, and asked about his major. Pure theater designed to showcase his empathy and emotional intelligence. But when an older busboy accidentally brushed his arm while clearing tables, his mask slipped for exactly 3 seconds. "Watch it," he snarled, ice-cold venom dripping from every syllable. The busboy apologized profusely, while Marcus assessed whether anyone had witnessed his true nature. Then the charming smile snapped back into place like a weapon being concealed. I should have run. That 3-second glimpse revealed everything. The calculated performance, the instant cruelty toward anyone powerless, the seamless mask replacement. But instead, I filed it away as a minor red flag, rationalizing that everyone has bad moments. Fatal mistake. Because what I didn't know was that he had been watching me for weeks, studying my routines, learning my vulnerabilities. He'd chosen this location because he knew I went there every Tuesday at 2:15 p.m. He'd researched my recent breakup through social media, my demanding job through LinkedIn, my strained family relationships through careful observation of my interactions. It wasn't a random encounter. I was a carefully selected target whose psychological profile matched his success criteria, and he was about to show me what 15 years of perfecting destruction looked like. But first, he needed to hook me completely, and his love-bombing technique was about to reveal just how methodical and terrifying his approach really was. By date 2, Marcus was discussing soul connections and cosmic destiny with the conviction of a true believer. Red flag number 2. But he delivered these concepts with such apparent sincerity that I felt special rather than suspicious. He positioned every interaction as fate, not calculation. "I've never felt this kind of instant connection," he said over dinner at an expensive restaurant I later learned he couldn't afford. "My ex-girlfriends were all so shallow, so focused on material things. You're different. You see people's true nature." Classic control tactics, positioning me as uniquely perceptive while simultaneously testing whether I'd caught his earlier cruelty display. When I didn't challenge him about the busboy incident, he knew I'd passed his screening process and was ready for phase 2. The love bombing accelerated exponentially. Flowers delivered to my office with cards signed, "Your Cosmic Twin." Handwritten notes tucked under my windshield daily, each one referencing specific details from our conversations to prove how deeply he listened. Texts every 18 minutes expressing devotion and admiration that felt both overwhelming and intoxicating. I tracked the frequency because something felt suffocating, but I misinterpreted the relentless attention, as passion. The intensity was carefully designed to flood my emotional processing capacity, making rational analysis impossible while creating chemical addiction to his validation. What I didn't realize was that he was simultaneously gathering intelligence about my vulnerabilities through seemingly innocent conversations. Every discussion was a data mining operation disguised as romantic intimacy, each revelation cataloged for future exploitation. "Tell me about your childhood, Kyle," he'd say with apparent fascination, leaning in like my stories were the most compelling he'd ever heard. When I shared painful memories about my critical mother, who never seemed satisfied with my achievements, he filed that information away. When I mentioned my deep-seated fear of abandonment after my father left when I was 12, he mentally cataloged that weakness for future leverage. Most insidiously, every conversation gradually became about him while feeling like it was about me. When I shared excitement about my promotion, he'd respond with detailed analysis of his own career challenges that somehow required immediate emotional support. When I mentioned weekend plans with friends, he'd skillfully redirect to his complex family dynamics that desperately needed my insight and empathy. "You're such an incredible listener," he'd say, after monopolizing 3 hours of conversation about his problems. "Most people are too narcissistic to really hear others. You have this gift for making people feel understood. Pure projection wrapped in flattery." Everything he accused others of, narcissism, shallow focus, inability to truly listen, he was doing methodically while making me feel grateful for his emotional intelligence rather than controlled by his warfare. The manipulation was so subtle, so expertly crafted, that I felt like the luckiest woman alive to have found someone who appreciated my empathy and emotional depth. I had no idea I was being systematically programmed for destruction. 3 weeks in, he suggested cohabitation with perfectly logical reasoning that addressed every practical concern I might have. Shared expenses would help my savings goals. Natural relationship progression felt healthy and mature. Practical convenience would give us more time together. My gut screamed danger, but his financial arguments made complete rational sense. I ignored my instincts and chose logic over intuition, the exact response he'd been conditioning me toward through weeks of training me to value his rational analysis over my emotional responses. Because what I didn't know was that moving in together was phase 2 of his documented strategy, and phase 3 would begin destroying my body within days. But first, I needed to see how thoroughly he'd prepared for total psychological domination, and what I found in his apartment would reveal the true scope of his operation. Moving in revealed the terrifying extent of his preparation. My belongings were systematically relocated to better positions without discussion or consultation. My books migrated from my carefully organized shelves to locations he deemed more appropriate. My skincare products mysteriously disappeared overnight, replaced with expensive alternatives he'd selected based on his research into what would work better for my skin type. When I mentioned wanting to keep my original shampoo, a simple request that should have been immediately honored, he looked genuinely confused and slightly hurt by my resistance to his improvements. "But the one I bought is so much better for your hair type," he said, with the patience of someone explaining basic concepts to a child. I spent hours researching the best sulfate-free formulas. Why would you want to use inferior products when I found something that will actually help your hair? His logic was elegant and insidious. His preferences weren't just different opinions. They were objectively superior choices based on research and expertise. My preferences weren't wrong. They were evidence of poor judgment and lack of information. He wasn't controlling my environment. He was helping me make better decisions through his superior knowledge and care for my well-being. The framework was brilliant and gradually erosive. By positioning himself as the expert on everything from hair care to career strategy to social dynamics, he methodically eroded my confidence in my own judgment. I started second-guessing decisions I'd made successfully for years, seeking his input before making choices I'd previously handled independently. But the real assault was just beginning, and I was about to discover that my declining health wasn't accidental. It was the intended outcome of a systematic destruction protocol refined over years of practice. The physical attack started during his improvement sessions, evening feedback periods disguised as caring communication and loving support. He'd dissect every aspect of my day with clinical precision, explaining how I could have performed better professionally, handled social situations more effectively, and communicated more clearly. I'm only sharing this because I love you enough to help you reach your potential. He'd preface each psychological beating with apparent sincerity. Anyone else would just let you keep making these mistakes, but I care too much about your success to stay silent when I see you limiting yourself. The pattern was devastatingly effective and carefully timed. Every positive event in my life triggered immediate improvement sessions that lasted hours. Work recognition became a detailed analysis of why my success was probably accidental rather than earned. Social connections became exhaustive deconstructions of why my friendships were likely unbalanced and potentially harmful to my growth. My stomach began rejecting food during these evening critiques. He'd spend 2 to 3 hours explaining my inadequacies with the calm detachment of a scientist while I sat there unable to eat, pushing dinner around my plate as my appetite completely vanished under his relentless, methodical criticism. "You're not eating," he'd observe with perfectly calibrated concern, as if my loss of appetite was a mysterious development unrelated to his psychological assault. "Are you feeling stressed about something? You seem tense lately." Brilliant strategy. He was creating the stress while positioning himself as the concerned observer of my mysterious health problems. Every symptom he deliberately caused became evidence of my inability to handle normal life pressures, my emotional instability, my need for his guidance and support. The gaslighting was so sophisticated that I began questioning my own perceptions. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe his feedback was genuinely helpful, and my negative reactions were evidence of my defensiveness and resistance to growth. 2 months in, I'd lost 18 pounds, and my clothes hung loose on my shrinking frame. My hair started falling out in alarming clumps that clogged the shower drain every morning, despite my desperate attempts to hide the evidence. My hands developed a persistent tremor that made simple tasks like writing or typing increasingly difficult. Sleep became impossible as I'd lie awake analyzing every interaction, trying to understand why I felt constantly anxious despite his apparent devotion and support. When I mentioned my symptoms, Marcus insisted on driving me to every doctor's appointment. 3 different physicians found nothing wrong, but Marcus seemed thrilled each time. "See, just anxiety," he'd say triumphantly. What I discovered later was horrifying. He'd been secretly recording every consultation, building an audio library of my medical instability to use against me if I ever tried to leave. By month 3, the pattern was locked in place. I controlled nothing in our relationship anymore. He decided what we ate based on his nutritional research, when we ate based on his optimization schedule, what shows we watched based on his educational preferences, which friends we socialized with based on his assessment of their influence on my development. When I suggested having my college roommate over for dinner, a simple request for social connection, he'd respond with a heavy sigh and apparent disappointment. "If that's really important to you, of course we can do it," he'd say, with the tone of someone making a significant sacrifice. "I just think she's kind of exhausting and negative. Remember how she dominated the conversation last time and made everything about her drama? But if you think spending time with people like that is good for your growth, it's your choice." He never forbade anything outright. That would be obviously controlling behavior. Instead, he made every choice I wanted feel selfish, exhausting, or potentially harmful to my development. I found myself canceling plans to avoid his subtle disapproval and disappointment, then felt genuinely grateful when he didn't punish me for disappointing him with my poor judgment. But I'd started tracking the correlation between his behavior and my physical condition, and the pattern that emerged was about to reveal the true scope of his psychological warfare. I tracked the pattern in my health journal and discovered something terrifying. Every time something good happened in my life, a promotion, lunch with my sister, recognition at work, my body would break down that same evening. But on days with no outside contact and no achievements, I felt completely normal. He was literally making me sick with success. I was recording organized psychological abuse disguised as concerned partnership. But I had no idea how clinical, methodical, and extensively documented his approach really was. By month 4, I weighed 108 pounds, and my hair was visibly thinning to the point where colleagues started expressing concern. I collapsed during a client meeting, a complete physical breakdown that required emergency medical attention. My boss insisted I take immediate medical leave until we could determine what was causing my dramatic health decline. That's when I made the discovery that revealed the true horror of what was happening to me and changed everything forever. I found his real strategy hidden in encrypted files on his laptop while he was at work. What I discovered was so disturbing and comprehensive that it took me 3 full days to process the implications and understand the scope of what I'd uncovered. He wasn't just improvising psychological abuse based on instinct or natural cruelty. He was following a detailed scientific protocol that he'd developed and systematically refined over years of practice. And I wasn't his first target. I was number 17 in a documented series of victims. The folder labeled Subject Progression Strategy contained clinical records spanning 8 years. Each woman's complete psychological destruction had been carefully tracked, analyzed, and optimized for future implementation. 16 previous victims whose lives had been methodically destroyed using increasingly sophisticated approaches refined through practice and analysis. But seeing evidence of their systematic destruction wasn't what broke me. It was realizing I was just the latest iteration in his ongoing psychological laboratory. My file was labeled Subject 17, Sarah, Advanced Strategy Trial. Everything that had happened to me over the previous 4 months was logged with scientific precision and clinical detachment. Day 12, initial cohabitation achieved. Beginning Phase 3, criticism protocols. Subject are responding as predicted. Day 28, appetite reduction noted. 8-pound weight loss recorded, increasing session frequency and intensity. Day 45, social isolation, 70% complete. Subject canceling personal plans without direct instruction. Dependency markers are increasing. Day 62, medical consultation sought. The doctor found no physical causes. Deflection successful. Gaslighting reinforced. Day 89, hair loss initiated. Subject attributes effects to work stress. Medical gaslighting protocols are highly effective. Day 103, advanced dependency achieved. The subject now seeks validation exclusively from the primary operator, ready for phase 4. But here's what made my blood freeze and my hands shake as I read. He'd been perfecting this formula with each victim, learning from their responses, optimizing his strategy for maximum psychological damage with minimum detection risk. The methodology files revealed his complete system. Target selection explained why he'd stalked me at the coffee shop. I was recently divorced, professionally successful, and isolated. Isolation and dependency explained the love bombing and why every conversation became about him. Reality distortion explained the improvement sessions and why he celebrated my normal test results. Documentation explained his obsession with my medical appointments. He was building evidence of my instability. I was about to enter phase 5, complete control, where I'd become his psychological slave. But the files revealed something even more sinister and far-reaching than individual predatory behavior targeting random victims. Marcus belonged to an extensive online network of men who shared these subject improvement strategies and collaborated on technique development. They called themselves reality architects, specialists in making women doubt their own sanity while systematically destroying their physical health through psychological manipulation. And what I found in their communication logs was about to reveal a massive network of organized psychological manipulators operating across the country. The forum had over 3,000 active members sharing detailed case studies, technique refinements, and video records of their targets' psychological breakdowns. My deterioration wasn't just his private experiment. It was educational content for an entire network of abusers learning to perfect psychological abuse through shared knowledge and collaborative refinement. The level of organization was terrifying. They had specialized subgroups focused on different demographics: recent divorcees, career women, college students, single mothers. They shared target identification techniques, approach strategies, red flag management, and disposal methods with the efficiency of a corporate training program. But the most horrifying discovery was still coming, because this network wasn't just sharing approaches and collaborating on technique development. They were actively profiting from victims' harm through organized video production and distribution. I found the video files next, hidden in a folder marked revenue streams. Hidden camera footage of me collapsing, crying, losing weight, pulling out my hair during stress episodes. Hours of surveillance material uploaded to their private servers with clinical titles and professional editing that turned my suffering into instructional content for aspiring abusers. The videos were professionally edited with detailed commentary explaining which techniques were being demonstrated at each moment. My psychological and physical destruction had been converted into a comprehensive training resource for an entire network of psychological abusers seeking to improve their own methods. Marcus had earned over $80,000 from documenting my breakdown and the systematic destruction of his previous targets. Premium network memberships cost $500 monthly for access to live victim surveillance feeds, weekly technique workshops, and advanced methodology training sessions. The profit structure was sophisticated and extensive. Basic membership provided access to archived case studies and technique discussions. Premium membership included live surveillance feeds from current operations, and real-time coaching from experienced operators. Elite membership offered personalized consultation for developing customized approaches for specific target types. The graduation protocol revealed my scheduled fate in terrifying detail. In 6 weeks, I would either be sold to another network member for continued psychological experimentation or used to recruit new victims by providing testimonials about Marcus's supportive nature during his next love bombing campaign. I was going to become both a discarded victim and an unwitting recruitment tool for the next woman's systematic destruction. But discovering their complete strategy and organizational structure also revealed their fatal weakness and the key to destroying their entire operation. These manipulators operated through secrecy, victim isolation, and target confusion about what was happening to them. Their entire system depended on keeping subjects unaware of the systematic nature of their abuse and the organized network behind it, but armed with complete knowledge of their tactics and extensive evidence of their organized network, I could destroy their operation permanently and protect future victims. That night, I implemented what I now call the nuclear option. No gradual escape, no careful planning, no risk of discovery or retaliation, just immediate, total extraction with maximum damage to their entire network and complete exposure of their methodology. I spent 4 hours systematically copying everything from Marcus's computer. All 3,000 network members' real identities and contact information, detailed victim records and surveillance footage, 8 years of strategy refinements and technique development, comprehensive financial records showing profits from video sales, communication logs revealing their complete organizational structure, and evidence of upcoming target selection and recruitment activities across 12 states. I also discovered something that made my blood run cold. They weren't just targeting random women anymore based on opportunity or convenience. They developed highly specific victim profiles and were actively recruiting new network members to systematically expand their geographical reach and victim capacity. What had started as individual predatory behavior had evolved into organized psychological exploitation with the efficiency and reach of a criminal enterprise. Then I disappeared while Marcus was at work, leaving behind a laptop displaying their entire forum with a timer counting down to automatic law enforcement submission. FBI Cybercrime Division, State Attorney General, International Human Exploitation Task Force, and Internet Crimes Against Children Unit. But I also sent mass emails to all 16 previous victims with complete records of their abuse, contact information for each other, evidence that their suffering had been filmed and monetized without consent, and comprehensive legal resources for pursuing criminal charges. The emails included detailed explanations of each control technique they'd experienced, clinical validation that their health problems had been intentionally caused through systematic psychological assault, and definitive proof that they weren't isolated incidents, but part of organized predatory operations targeting multiple victims. Within 6 hours, panicked network members were frantically calling Marcus as their supposedly secure operation collapsed around them. Their private forum was completely compromised, member identities exposed to law enforcement, operational strategies documented as evidence, and financial operations traced through multiple jurisdictions. By midnight, 7 victims have filed detailed police reports documenting identical abuse patterns and providing extensive evidence of organized criminal activity. By week's end, the FBI had opened a comprehensive, multi-state investigation into organized psychological abuse, unauthorized recording, distribution, and racketeering through systematic victim exploitation. The entire Reality Architect network went permanently dark within 72 hours as members frantically deleted evidence, abandoned their online identities, and fled to different platforms. But the damage was irreversible. Their complete strategies were now documented as evidence, their victim patterns identified by law enforcement, and their communication networks permanently compromised. Marcus called me once. I answered with 4 words: "The experiment is over." Then I blocked his number and activated the nuclear options final phase, coordinated victim testimony that would establish legal precedent for prosecuting organized psychological abuse as federal criminal activity. 3 months later, my weight had returned to 135 pounds, actually healthier than before meeting Marcus. The chronic anxiety that had defined my daily existence disappeared completely within weeks of separation. My hair grew back thicker and shinier than before, but the most important recovery was mental. I developed permanent immunity to manipulation tactics and the ability to recognize psychological warfare immediately. The process wasn't simple or automatic. I developed what therapists call complex PTSD from ongoing psychological trauma that required professional treatment and extensive therapy. My physical symptoms weren't mysterious medical conditions. They were normal biological responses to abnormal psychological warfare designed to break down my mental and physical health. Understanding the clinical framework helped me stop blaming myself for staying, for believing his explanations, for allowing my health to deteriorate so dramatically. I hadn't been weak, naive, or stupid. I'd been systematically conditioned by someone who'd spent years perfecting these psychological manipulation techniques through extensive practice and collaboration with other manipulators. But I'd also gained something invaluable through this horrific experience: complete understanding of how these manipulators operate and permanent immunity to their methods. Once you've seen their entire playbook and understand their systematic approach, their tactics become transparent and ineffective rather than subtle and powerful. Connecting with the other victims provided something crucial for all of our recoveries: external validation that our experiences were real, systematically planned, and absolutely not our fault. The isolation these manipulators depend on was permanently broken by shared understanding, mutual support, and collaborative action against our abusers. 6 months later, the FBI's investigation had expanded to include 147 documented victims across 23 states. The Reality Architect network was revealed to be part of a much larger ecosystem of organized psychological abuse that operated through multiple online platforms, recruitment strategies, and monetization methods. Marcus was arrested on federal charges, including racketeering, unauthorized recording distribution, wire fraud, organized criminal activity, and conspiracy to commit psychological abuse. His trial became a landmark case, establishing legal precedent for prosecuting systematic psychological abuse as organized crime rather than individual domestic violence incidents. Here's what I learned that every woman needs to understand. Sophisticated manipulators don't operate alone anymore as isolated individuals. They're networked, methodical, and constantly refining their tactics through shared victim experiences and monetized harm. If you're experiencing unexplained health problems in a relationship, especially if your partner shows unusual interest in documenting your medical issues or seems pleased by your declining health, you're not dealing with normal relationship stress. You're potentially dealing with organized psychological warfare designed to make you sick while creating evidence of your instability. Pay attention to these warning signs. Symptoms worsen after positive events in your life. Your partner minimizes health concerns while simultaneously documenting them. You find yourself apologizing for seeking medical help. And most critically, your partner seems unusually knowledgeable about manipulation tactics or frequently mentions unstable ex-girlfriends who had similar health problems. Trust your body's warnings. Document everything secretly. Seek outside validation from people your partner hasn't influenced. Most importantly, understand that anyone who truly loves you would be alarmed by your declining health and committed to eliminating its cause, not secretly filming your breakdown for profit and entertainment. Your mysterious conditions aren't medical mysteries requiring years of investigation. They're your nervous system trying to warn you that you're living with someone slowly harming you for entertainment and profit. The network that tried to destroy me is gone, but there are others, and the only way to stop them is to understand exactly how they operate, recognize their techniques immediately, and expose them before they perfect their methods on new victims. Listen to your body, document the patterns, seek outside perspectives, build evidence, create exit strategies. Remember that manipulators fear exposure more than anything else because their entire system depends on keeping victims isolated and confused. Once you understand their strategy, you develop permanent immunity to their techniques. Education is liberation. Knowledge is protection. Understanding is your weapon. Your health problems aren't coincidences or stress responses. They're warning signals that you're under organized attack. Trust your body. It's trying to save your life. If this opened your eyes to control tactics you didn't recognize before, share it. Your share could save someone's life. Subscribe for more content exposing warfare tactics, and drop a comment if you've experienced unexplained health problems in a relationship. Remember, you're not crazy, you're not weak, and your body is trying to warn you. Trust yourself.